What does it take to get beyond the damage of words? I'm Katrina Collier. Join me each week as I explore what it takes to step into a happier future. My guests are sharing their stories of when they realised that they needed help and what it took to take that first step, so that you leave inspired and maybe even start on your own path to self-love, care, compassion, and of course happiness. So without further ado, let's hear their stories. Matt Jessop, welcome to Beyond the Damage of Words podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And at 5 p.m, when we're both a bit like...
Lovely to be here, and thank you for making the time.
Oh, thank you as well. I always think whenever the men speak up, especially, I'm very, very grateful that you're doing that. So we always just launch straight in here. So what led you into going and seeking some help, or was it a series of things that led you in to
Yeah, I think
going,
it was a series of things.
talk to someone?
I think subconsciously I'd known for some time that I was struggling for a variety of reasons. I don't recall any one particular event that kind of sort of led me to go and seek help. I think it was more a succession of different things. I think a little bit of my wife cajoling me or nagging, depending on which term you prefer.
We women would just say nagging. We know we're nagging. We don't like nagging. We just nag.
She obviously
cajoling does sound kinder, though.
yeah, absolutely. She knows me well enough to know that I was struggling, so she encouraged me. I had a conversation with a dear friend in the US who'd gone through a bit of a messy divorce, and he said something that stuck with me, being that he'd been told in no uncertain terms that he wouldn't be much use to his kids and supporting them through the separation if he didn't first look after himself and get himself to a good place. And that really struck home with me.
It's quite a tough concept as well, isn't it? Because sometimes we feel like we're being a bit indulgent, or we're, taking care of ourselves as sort of selfish or something. But it is exactly what you said, that we cannot care for our families if we don't care for ourselves first.
100%. And I think as a male as well, I think there is an expectation that you're the kind of sort of the pillar of the family and the support, and therefore, to a certain extent, for the rest of the family. I mean, in most families, we all know that the opposite is true. It's normally the woman that is the rock that holds everything together. But I think there is an expectation that we're the strong ones, and we don't necessarily need to look after ourselves first, but absolutely do. When you were having that
conversation, what were you feeling? I sort of sometimes hear that people feel like they're sort of like, I don't know, glued down or weighed down, or they feel blackness. Like, what were you feeling when you actually opened up to your friend?
It's
I know it was a little alcoholic conversation.
Yeah, there was alcohol involved, absolutely.
It's the best way to open up sometimes, isn't it? And then you get such a supportive response. You think, now I can do that without the alcohol. But what was going on in your body, if you were to explain it?
Yeah,
it's a deep question at 5 o'clock on a Monday.
At the time, I can't remember exactly. We were out for a meal after a conference, I think. And at the time, so when I did eventually seek counselling, one of the things that my counsellor highlighted to me was that I had two very different personalities, in the sense that if she asked me about work, I'd be upbeat, effervescent, in my comfort zone and confident. And I was in a work environment at the time. So I was away from the home, and most of the challenges were home related. So I think probably in that moment, I was probably in quite a good place. But obviously the challenges at home were always there, always in the back of my mind. And I remember feeling at the time when my friend sort of said this, it really resonated and sort of struck a chord with, do you know what, that makes so much sense. And then I think we probably carried on with the evening, and then it was later when I was reflecting on the conversation of like, yeah, do you know what, that's so true, and I really need to take some action.
It's interesting because I think about at work, it can often be, which you've expressed in your email to me, is sort of it's the logic side of what you do, isn't it? It's quite controlled, and you're on deadlines, and it's very easy to feel like a sense of achievement. Whereas actually, often when it's home, there's a lot more emotion involved, and it's a lot harder to feel that impact. So I'm not surprised that you had the two sides to you that
Yeah, very
almost
much. And
contradict each other, almost.
control is an interesting. Well, I'm not a control.
Yeah.
I'm about as far from being a control freak as you can get. But in a work environment, I'm able to control and rationalise
Mm, mm,
things and understand what's going on. Whereas at home, I think
mm,
big part of my challenge is not being able to rationalize, understand my son's mental health,
mm.
to rationalize, understand the my wife's physical health issues that she was having at the time. I mean, she's
Yeah,
fine now, but she went through a long
which is
period
so
where
good.
um, we didn't really know what the root cause of the problem was to be able to do it. So it felt very much being out of control, as
Yeah.
opposed to being in control
Mm,
in a work environment. And I confess I would use work as an escape from the issues at home. It was my safe space that I could run to, and I would travel a lot and work very long hours because it got
mhm.
me away from having to kind of sort of face the challenges that were going on at the time.
That's a really huge confession, and just beautifully honest as well. I said that a lot in my home, actually, my childhood home. That's what dad would do.
Yeah,
Yeah, dad worked very long hours, pretty well
yeah,
to escape. Wasn't great for
yes,
us, but it was good for him. So
yeah,
I can understand what you're saying, particularly, when you with your wife's health issues, with that almost feeling of helplessness, isn't it? Like, I really
yeah.
I wanna fix you, and I can't fix you. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
It's
and the
quite
same with
tough.
my son as well. So I want to be able to do something, but I don't know what or how. I don't even
Mm,
understand kind of sort of the fact that he thinks differently to the average
yeah,
person,
yeah.
if you like, and
Are
therefore
you
trying to
happy to
rationalise.
share Are you happy to share what
Yeah,
he
sure.
has? Because I was surprised it said it was rare when it's 1 in 1,000 born. Like, isn't it something like 5 to 10 males are born with this a day? It's like
Yes,
it's very
but a
s
lot of them
it's
go
very
undiagnosed,
yeah.
so it's not something that they check for. So yeah,
Mm,
he has an extra male chromosome, a syndrome called 47XYY. So um, everybody has 23 pairs, and I know a lot more about genetics than I did before he was
yeah,
born. I tell you.
which is
So,
cool in a way.
yeah,
For the
but
science brain, you gotta like that.
everybody has 23 pairs of chromosomes. Your 23rd
Right.
pair are your sex chromosomes. So I have an X and a Y chromosome. You have two X chromosomes. And my son has an X and two Y chromosomes.
Interesting.
It's not a genetic. It's a pure freak of. It's not passed down. I mean, it's a pure
Right.
kind of accidental thing. Um,
Interesting.
you can have extra chromosomes on any one of the 23 pairs. Down syndrome, for example, is an extra chromosome. I think it's on the 13th pair. I could be wrong with that.
Ah,
So,
interesting.
depending which
Okay.
pair the extra chromosome attaches itself to, means all sorts of different things. And with
As to how
XYY
the
boys,
behavior and
yeah. So, they've not done a lot of studies into it.
which
I'll
is
tell you about one
surprising when
study
it's
just for
so
a
many
moment.
people. That was the bit that got me from your email. So I'm immediately Googling, because obviously Dr. Google knows everything.
Yeah,
But it was the rare, but it's in this many people, was the bit that, like, rare to me is it's like in 1 billion or something, not like, yeah. So that was quite surprising. So hence I was a bit cheeky and delved into that. I
yeah, no,
usually let people,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, on average, boys with an extra male chromosome are 4 inches taller than their father. So I'm 6'3",
right.
so he's a big lad. He's 6'7".
Goodness,
He's true to type. So um, and have learning and behavioural difficulties, which
right.
absolutely sums him up. Um, he's 28 now, so it's plateaued a bit. 10 years
Mm,
ago, 18, 19, 20, that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
when of course all
It's all
the hormones are rushing through their body through their teenage years
yeah.
at the time, and even without an extra chromosome, then obviously teenagers struggle to control their emotions. Um,
Yeah.
I vaguely, long time
As
ago
well.
now, but I vaguely remember going through that phase myself. But,
Yeah. I don't know. There's
um,
still a lot of teenagers wandering around out there. Um,
yeah,
that's another conversation for another podcast. So when you went, okay, there's been this series of things, and you spoke to your friend. What did you then do? Did you go and speak to someone? You mentioned a counselor. Like, what
yeah.
was
So
what
I actually
helped?
went
What didn't
through.
help? Maybe something didn't help.
I went through several different counsellors,
Mm,
and the first few were more just talking therapy. So
yep.
somebody sitting there listening and the opportunity to unburden yourself, which was
Mm.
kind of okay, and it works for some people, and I'm not
Yeah.
knocking it at all. But for me, I kind of sort of wasn't learning anything new from it or moving forward at all. And yes,
Yeah.
initially the kind of first few sessions an opportunity to burden yourself, and you kind of sort of get that feeling of release in doing so. But after a while, it was like this isn't really taking me anywhere.
Forward.
And it was a another friend who's a NLP, neuro linguistic programming, I think it stands for, um,
Yep.
practitioner, who said to me, "Well, try sort of more interventionist counselling, be it NLP or, um, or one of the others." So I tried a different counsellor who was more interventionist, who would actually challenge my thinking
Yeah.
and question, well, why? Why do you think like that? Why do you feel that?
Mm.
And it was that made me stop and kind of start to reevaluate my thoughts and my feelings and those types of things. And that, for me,
There's
personally, was really what made a difference.
yeah. It is quite
And
amazing,
helped
isn't it, when
transform it.
someone it's amazing when sorry to interrupt you, when someone
That's right.
shows you that I'm so good at that though. Um, they have to put that on my tombstone. Loves to interrupt. It's just I always get so excited, but it is amazing. I remember I talk about Michelle Zully so much when she showed me that like you can choose a different thought, and it's like when you come to that realization and you start going, why am I thinking that? I'm sure many who've listened to the podcast know I always think when I'm having a really negative phase, I then suddenly go, oh, I'm going to think about my dog. I will
Yeah,
focus on him and I'll take myself off to something pleasant. But it's like a light bulb goes off, isn't it? And
yeah,
suddenly it's like, well, I can choose what I'm thinking.
yeah,
Oh, it's quite amazing. So I'm glad that helped. But I get that feeling of wanting the motivation to go forward. I get that. I really get that.
it definitely did help. And it got to the point where I was in a much better place. Um,
Mm,
and I stopped. But more recently, I've re-engaged with Dawn, my counsellor, because
great.
after time it becomes harder and harder to kind of sort of self-maintain, staying in
Hmm.
that good place. So again, recently, Ollie's gone through. I mean, my wife's health, as I say, is all sorted now, so that's good.
Yeah,
But
what
Ollie
a
still
relief.
goes through good phases and not so and more challenging phases, and he's had a challenging
Mm,
phase recently. So um, yeah, I found myself in a space where I need to kind of sort of talk through my feelings and help to understand and
absolutely.
try and, as much as is possible, rationalise and get back into a better place. And
Yeah,
although I'm better at doing some of that myself, I still need the help and support from time to
I,
time. So
I, I, I think it's crucial because
yeah,
they hold a mirror up to us.
absolutely,
It's like I've had it. So I mentioned Roderick to you earlier, Roderick Lambert. So he's my business coach, but he's gone very much into the health. And when he was my business coach, he'd like hold a mirror up to me. And he'd just
yeah,
say, "Do you know you're using all this language?" I'm like, "No."
uh,
It's even though I've done all of the healing and on my personal stuff, even on the
yeah,
business side, there were things that I was doing. So I always find that really, I think that's where they're so powerful,
yes,
being able to just hold that mirror up and hold you a bit accountable. But
yes,
it's also it's so much peeling layers as well. So you will get through to a point and you're okay, and then you need to shift through another level, which is sort of up shifting your healing.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's great to hear. So what else have you done? Did you say CBT somewhere, or is that what that
Yeah,
is?
so Dawn. So the counsellor that worked for me is CBT.
Yeah.
So I didn't go down the NLP route. I went down the CBT route. Different
What's the
people.
CBT like? What's it like? What's it like, the CBT? I actually
Um,
haven't had it, I don't think, of everything I've done.
it's good. It really worked for me.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure different things work for different people, and I'm not kind of sort of
Mm.
knocking any of the other kind of sort of variants at all. But um, as I say, it was she would sort of question and draw out
Yeah.
the different circumstances and what was happening, flipping between kind of sort of what's been happening this week, what are your raw emotions, to the kind of
Ah,
sort of
okay.
longer term, going back into your past. Um, and as I described them, she would then stop me from time to time and go, right, okay, let's just probe into that one. Why do you think that? And
Gotcha.
question what I'd said,
Yeah.
and not it could be quite confrontational, not in an aggressive way or anything like that,
No,
but
no.
not allowing me to just kind of sort of bluff my way past it
Off the
and
hook.
and move on, but make sure that yeah, I really did kind of sort of be introspective and look at what I was
Yeah.
saying and why I was saying it and the way that I was saying it,
And
to
release the
really help me
emotion.
understand it.
Yeah. Did you hear Troy on the podcast a few weeks ago? He was talking about exactly that he went to all of these sessions and eventually they went, okay, so can I have the real Troy now? And he went, oh, damn it. Like
Yeah,
he was people pleasing. He was saying what he thought they wanted to hear.
yeah, and we do. I mean, I do it all day, every day at work,
Yeah.
and it's um, it's kind of sort of I've got an agenda, and I'm going to in a very polite way, of course, but kind of sort of
Of
go
course, you're
down the
British.
path that I'm intending to go down, and then all of a sudden you find this person in your way, going, "Oh, hang on a minute," um,
Mm,
but and that was what was great about it. It was,
yeah.
um, and she also did a I think I mentioned to you on my email, I've never been formally
Mm,
diagnosed with complex PTSD, but
yeah.
she did an informal assessment, and I was way past the threshold at the time, um, because of everything that had happened and
It's gone.
at home, and that kind
Yeah.
of sort of helped me sort of understand that yeah, it's you're not just kind of sort of being a wuss or or anything like that, but actually, yeah, no,
Mm,
you are struggling here.
yeah.
So that was a kind of sort of helpful exercise to go through as well, just to put some context around it.
Yeah. I mean, that was I mean, I had complex PTSD from my childhood trauma. But you can get it from any repetitive trauma. And that's the difference between it, obviously, and PTSD is that repetition. But you
Yeah,
can heal from it. So if you feel
yeah,
like I'm
absolutely.
going to live with this forever, you don't have to. If you keep doing the self work, you will get to that point where there's a lot of ease around it. But it was interesting listening to Gabor Mate, and I will probably drop this in the podcast quite a lot, actually, a bit cheekily. But he was saying that a lot of highly sensitive children, which is like 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people are born with high sensitivity, who
Yeah,
even just have stressed parents can end up with complex PTSD, but it shows as ADHD.
right.
And that's
Okay,
what they're
interesting.
diagnosed with. And they're given a drug because that suits the pharmaceutical
Yeah,
companies. So I have this concern all the time when people say they've got ADHD and I'm listening to the symptoms going, gosh, that sounds just like complex PTSD. And you've told me you've been through that. And
yeah,
hmm. And then you can, like you've done, go and get help and start easing the symptoms rather than numbing with a
yeah.
but anyway, that's just me having a little side rant.
The interesting part for me is kind of sort of and I know some of it is putting labels, but actually labels sometimes can help
Mm,
in terms of
mhm,
contextualizing things. But an aspect of the PTSD, which I'm sure you've seen, is the
mm.
different events trigger different behaviours,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and Ollie would come through the front door, and within a matter of seconds, I was, depending on how he was, I would either be in fight or flight mode, defensive,
Absolutely.
um, because of
Hypervigilant.
previous
What's their
experiences and all
mood?
of those kind of things, and helping me
Absolutely.
understand that response and
Hmm.
talk myself down from it at times was super helpful in terms of moving
Yeah.
forward.
That's amazing. And just to really gain that awareness, like that it's like a hypervigilance,
Yes.
in that, you go into alert, and just when you suddenly realize that. But the triggers is really interesting. What I will say is I've healed my core wounds because mine came from child abuse, so I've healed that, but I can still trigger.
Yeah.
So, Sue Ingram will attest to that. When we were away last year, she said something as a joke, and I just did not take it as a joke. And I went, "Achong," which is not like me. And I've known her for years. And it was just like, but I thought she was doing what mum used to do, which was lying about me. And she was just joking, and she really was just joking, and it all came from heart because she's just gorgeous. And it was like, "Oh," but it was over in seconds. It was the really quick awareness of, "Whoa, hang on," rather than it used to be, it became days worth of drama.
Yeah.
And it's so good that you've got that awareness, so you can start just, yeah,
Absolutely.
creating a safe space for yourself as well when you're kinda going into a situation with him.
Because
Sorry, I interrupted you
one,
again.
no, no, that's right. No, I was interrupting you. Apologies.
No,
One of
do, please.
one, one of my unhelpful behaviours is
Mm.
one of my coping strategies when things got challenging was to withdraw, um, and shut down in terms of communicating,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and and that drove two things which kind of perpetuated the problem. One, I wasn't communicating, so I was making the situation worse with the people around me. Um,
Mm.
but also by withdrawing, I was withdrawing into my own head and perpetuating my own narrative around what was
Trauma.
wrong and all of these kind of things, and again making the situation worse. So, kind of sort of having that fight or flight um, reaction and being able to recognise it and modify my behaviours as part of that has definitely made
Mm.
a difference. I
Yeah,
still do
when you feel
from time
yourself,
to time.
yeah.
I still got a long way to go, but having that kind of sort of awareness definitely helps.
There's probably a difference now, like, you can now say to your wife, "I know I'm withdrawing. I just
Yeah,
need to go and withdraw. I will be
yeah,
back." Almost reassuring her rather than, "Oh gosh, how long is he gonna be gone for? He's going on." 'Cause
yeah,
it's a very male thing to withdraw. I think this is why I'm struggling to get men to speak on the podcast, and so I'm so grateful. It's that normal thing to just withdraw and shush and, shut down, stiff upper lip. And
yeah.
of course, that's not what we need as women. We need the opposite. So
Exactly. And my
but
wife's
even it's
particularly
okay
outgoing.
if you kinda give it a time frame. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying my wife's particularly outgoing and extrovert, so she finds it
Mm,
exceptionally frustrating when I withdraw because it's the complete opposite of her norm.
mm,
So it does create tensions from time to time.
yeah,
But and part of it is you need that space to a certain extent, um, but doing it too often and too deeply and for too long
exactly.
is destructive. And
Yeah,
recognizing that and being able to pull myself out of it.
which is great, isn't it? That's what you got out of the session, like, even just that, but I'm sure there's so much more. I think that realization of, understanding how you're reacting and why you're reacting that way as well. Like,
Yeah,
I wish there was more information around about complex PTSD. There's a few people popping up that are being very vocal about it, which is great. So give it time because
yeah. Oh,
there's
we'll get there.
plenty of it around.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then the other thing that sort of learning for me, which I've learned to recognise over the years, not through anybody kind of sort of telling me, but just more kind of sort of working it out for myself,
Mm.
is um, the importance of sleep.
Oh,
So
yeah.
unfortunately, I one of my self medication strategies was to comfort eat, and I still do. Weight has then led to sleep apnea, and the quality of my sleep being
Oh,
poor. But
dear.
and I still struggle with that now. I have a CPAP machine,
Mm.
but I do need to lose weight, and that would help with that
Mm.
situation. But recognizing when I'm tired,
Hmm.
and how different I, how much better I deal with situations when I'm not tired to when I am tired,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
importance of sleep, and
And then,
trying
of
to do
course,
what I can to improve my sleep.
if you're comfort eating, you're probably going for the sugary sweets
Yep.
stuff. Yep, which is keeping you awake, especially around 3. That's when it tends to get me, which is when we then go into a worrying zone, overthinking. Like, it is a vicious, vicious cycle.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, definitely, and difficult to break
I
as well.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because I think if you keep continuing on that path and then that really helps you with the self-worth, you will stop reaching for the comfort eating. But yeah, I mean I would call it food addiction probably more than and it's a toughie. It's quite, and it's definitely one of I've put the in my memoir I've put the trauma tree, and it's quite interesting because it is one of the addictions, food addiction, and it is a way of
But my wife's given me
self-soothing.
a very good role model for breaking that. So in the last year, she's lost 5 stone, and um,
Wowzers, good for her.
exercising regularly, and has done fantastically well. Very proud of her.
What
So
was the
she's
switch? Did she sort out something, like, up here that helped? Sorry for the podcast, I'm pointing at my head. I keep forgetting there's a podcast here as well. But was it a mental thing as well, not just "Oh, I'm going to calorie deprive," or whatever awful thing that is
it
involved?
was yeah, it was actually a flight to America, 9 hours on a plane. Um, Problems with her back and her hips, and being in a lot of
Okay.
discomfort. And her brother lives just north of Seattle. So it was like, if I don't sort myself out,
Mm,
potentially I'm not going to be able to go and see my brother. And she's actually off to see her brother in a few weeks,
amazing.
which is great. And it was that one particular, well, a flight to
Yeah,
Florida and back again where she really, really struggled, which was the trigger for her to go, no, I've got to sort this out
that's
now. So
amazing.
yeah, she's done fantastically well,
Yeah,
but shown me a path of, yeah, it can be done, and you can break the cycle,
yeah,
and make a difference.
yeah.
So
I mean,
the
she's
only
certainly you've gotta have the reason, so she's had a strong reason, but with yours, I feel like there is that underlying cause, and I know there's stuff which we won't go into, but there is other stuff, and I think that once you start healing that, then it will just be easier as
yeah,
well.
definitely,
It is mostly food. That's the really interesting thing. We often think, "Oh, we have to exercise, exercise." Exercise is very important, particularly as we're older, but actually most of it is the food,
yeah,
and just
100%,
changes, yeah. But there are
100.
also ways to do it without feeling hungry, believe it or not, which
The,
is
the extra step,
important.
for me, which is kind of so tied into what we were talking about earlier,
Mm,
which I know, but I haven't quite cracked it yet, um, is work is my comfort zone, but it also
mhm,
becomes my excuse for not
mhm,
having time to do the exercise, which is total rubbish, really. It's not really a
mm,
good excuse, but I use it as an excuse of, oh, I've got too much work to do. I haven't got time to go for a walk, or
mm.
do these kind of things. And that's
Yeah,
the bit that I need to kind of sort of break in my head to
yeah.
get me on the right
I
path.
I'm gonna take you straight back to the trauma tree because it is work addiction is very real.
Yeah.
Exercise addiction is also one. So
Oh,
my
absolutely.
ex-husband,
Yeah.
exercise addiction. So like he is stick thin and forever exercising, but that fills a void for him. But it's like it's another distraction. So actually it's all about balance. While you're saying that, I'm just thinking of the deadlines I've got coming up and must make sure I keep exercising. The self-imposed deadline I've just given myself. It's like, "Oh, didn't think that through. What about the exercise?" Because I know I'm like you, it'll be the first thing that gets thrown out.
Yes.
But actually it's funny even doing it from a strength point of view, it's just I bet your wife says that as well, just feeling strong again is really quite exciting.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
does. Not so much the addiction, but just that feeling of strong. So
Feeling as strong,
what was
and a feeling of taking back control of her life as well. It's a real kind of sort of
yeah.
positive drug, if you like, in its own right. That's it's been really good for her.
She'll have no problem on that flight this time.
No,
And
not at
also,
all.
Seattle's
Should be
quite outdoorsy city as well, so she'll be able to walk around Seattle really easily as well. It's
yeah, and
oh,
her
when's she
brother's very
going? Not in the
outdoorsy.
cold, I hope. Sorry, I missed that.
I was just saying her brother's very outdoorsy as well, so they'll be out
Good.
exercising and walking the dog when they're out there and
Yeah,
all of those good things. So, she's very much
that's
looking
good.
forward to it.
I have seen some hysterical photos of Seattle in the snow. It's not so great. Just lots of people sliding down hills. So I hope she's not going when it's like that. That's for sure.
I should be jealous because I'm right down on the south coast, so I
Yep.
can't remember the last time we had snow down here of any significance, and I really miss it. So it always snowed in my childhood, and we don't seem to get it these days down here on the coast. So
No,
I'll
global
be
warming.
jealous if it snows while she's out there.
Yeah, I think we had like a smattering the other day here in London, but it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, nothing, not like you used to have. So if you were to leave the listener with like a final thought or a final words, what would they be for anyone that's listening, or even for yourself? What's next? What do you plan to do besides the weight thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the spirit of the podcast, I mean,
Mm,
if you're thinking about breaking the cycle and doing something, do it.
yeah,
You'll never regret it. And it'll be different things for different people, are the right way forward. But just
mm,
do something and break the cycle. And there's no shame in asking for help and seeking help
yeah,
whatsoever. But also, again, a bit like me at the moment, if you've done it in the past and it helped, then get back to it.
yeah,
I'm sure you know better than I that it's a lifelong journey
mm,
that you need to keep feeding it
yeah,
and moving forward.
absolutely.
So yeah, if you haven't done it, do
That's
it.
excellent advice.
If you need to
Yeah.
do it again, do it again.
Yeah, and I also love that you tried something, you're like, "Mm, it wasn't for me," but then you tried something else and you didn't, and sometimes people feel like they can't do that, and you should, because
Yeah,
I've tried lots of things and
absolutely.
some I've gone, and others I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I love this," and you're exactly right. It's what suits that person. We're all
Yes.
so different, aren't we? Find the person with the therapy or whatever, the
Yeah.
healing modality that helps you as
And
well.
I
So
mean, I
if
think,
it
as I mentioned, the trigger for me was talking
mm,
to friends and colleagues and um, getting their ideas and input. I mean, if it wasn't
mm,
for one friend who said, "Well, try something interventionist," and
mm,
if it wasn't for my conversation with my colleague originally in America, um, that had been kind of sort of the original seed of it all. So if you're not talking to people just informally and kind of
mm,
sort of helping you shape what is the right way forward in your mind. So don't be afraid to have those
mm,
conversations. The one thing I have learned,
mm,
um, the one thing I've never had a problem with is kind of sort of talking about my son or my wife to other people, and that has
yeah.
always helped. And the one thing that I have learned through talking to people is the number of people that have all different challenges, but
Stuff.
relatable challenges that they're going through. I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of kind of sort of there's not many of us out there that are struggling in the way that I'm struggling or whatever it might be, and that's just couldn't be
It's
further
not
from the
true.
truth.
Yeah. Ian Pettigrew has a beautiful question, and I know that I saw in your email you wrote that someone actually asked you how you were.
Yeah,
His question is, "How are you today?" And
yeah,
he's like, "Ask people, how are you today?" And it's like it's such a powerful question, and then
oh,
people can't really
completely
fob it
agree.
off either. Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, great
Matt,
question.
just Matt, if people want to get in touch with you, shall I put your LinkedIn? Is that
Please
the
do. Yeah,
easiest if
pleasure.
someone wanted
Yeah, no
to
problem at
get
all.
in
Yeah,
touch? But thank you. I think you're so right. Just and you've bravely spoken up on this podcast, and I think that's it, isn't it? Just speak up, talk to people. I think you're so right. It's
100%.
there's plenty of people having stuff.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you so much. I'm so
Oh no,
grateful for
thank
your
you.
time.
No, absolute pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Damage of Words. How brave, how vulnerable, all to inspire listeners like you to take a step, or inspire others to take a step. Imagine what healing we could create if we normalise this conversation. So please pass this on and of course subscribe so we can do just that. Until next time, thank you.